Welcome, Byron, to the Leaders Who Care series. How you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
I am good. That sounded so formal, didn't it? Jeez.
It did.
It's good to see you again. I'm really happy you're here to share a lot of good stuff that you're doing. And first, and most important is to shout out to our mutual friend Margaret Malloy for
Yes.
introducing us. She's a superstar, and I'm really happy she introduced us. So, hey, Margaret, what's up? And
Wonderful human being.
She is. She's the best. And let's start by if you could introduce yourself. And men always do this. Don't start with your job. We'll get to that. I want to. Who's Byron? Family, your favorite color, something you've never told anybody ever you want to announce now, stuff
Sure.
like that, and then we'll hit it from there.
My name is Byron Slosar. I am originally from Louisiana. First and foremost, I'm a dad and a husband. That has been my life's mission. And so the entrepreneurship CEO thing came later in life, as in New Orleans, we have a word called lagniappe, a little something extra. And so my job is my lagniappe, but the thing that I exist for is my family.
Awesome. Many pets?
I don't trust people who don't have dogs.
I'm with you.
And I don't really trust people who have cats unless the cats behave like dogs. But we have a very large yellow lab named Rose.
All right, Rose. Remember that cartoon? It was cat dog or dog cat. It was one thing and something.
No.
Yeah, there was a weird thing, but it was there. So what were you like as a kid or a teenager? Were you introverted, extroverted back then? Were you a young entrepreneur with like a lemonade stand out there? Were you playing sports, music? What?
No. I always the Byron that y'all get to meet now is very different. I grew up in the South. I have 5 siblings. I often introduce myself as the company that I founded, Hello Hive, focuses on the power of diversity as a lived experience, not only an identity. And so the way that I often introduce myself is my identity is that I'm part of the LGBT community. My experience is that I'm a gay Southern Jew that went to Catholic school my entire life in Louisiana. I grew up with 5 siblings. I am number 4 out of 6, which is quite possibly the worst positioning ever in a family. And so I had a wonderful childhood. However, I had no idea who I was. And, throughout high school, when I realized a lot about myself, but kept it buried for way too long, my memories really start after college, right? So a lot of my job is working with college students. I didn't particularly love college, but it was very different upbringing for me. And so strong family unit, strong education, but not very fulfilling.
Yeah, I could see how that will thread through to what you do. So start with your journey, about you were studying sociology and business at Tulane. At that time, what were you envisioning?
No idea. I mean, I'm 45. When I was in college, internships really still hadn't taken the purpose or the relevance they have now. But thank God for that, because I went to summer camp every summer, and summer camp was, my everything. It was where I met my friends. I ended up running their equestrian riding program for several years. Like kind of, coming through is a very different journey of education. And the degrees that we studied, the professions that we looked at, I was just getting through college. I figured I'd get a job on the back end of it. It wasn't a huge focus of mine. And so ended up with a very interesting first job. I thought that I was interviewing for a real estate position because it was development, but it was actually fundraising. So that can give you a clear perspective around how confused I was about the career landscape, which is catalyzed a little bit later into my career. But that was a good bit of my early journey for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wanted to be a pro hockey player, and I ended up, being a CPA at Deloitte.
Yeah.
Go figure.
I think that I really just wanted to be a dad. I mean, it took a longer time than I thought, but I mean, the only and one of the few things that I actually knew about myself and about my future at that point in time was that.
Well, not to sound, like an obvious statement, but isn't that the best job ever?
Yeah. And I saw it every day of my life with my dad, right? It was something that I saw as a future role that was much more than a position that I would have. But again, back in college too, we weren't really focused on careers back then. I studied sociology. I didn't really know what that meant. I don't think that a lot of the degree played a huge role in where I am today, other than I kind of existed in a social setting in college and had to learn a lot about myself and how to study and a lot of the soft skills we talk about, but not a whole lot of relevant material from needing to know exactly what that degree meant to what I'm doing today.
Although I agree, that's why a lot's changing with colleges right now and the value of that, and or just being skills training. But the how to study or how to determine where things are derived from, I think maybe the biggest aspect of all.
Or how to just exist. I mean, you look at,
Right.
arriving into college and having really no perspective around what you're walking into. And it's similar for our students these days. It's a very different world that you walk in very quickly. And then when you put, the world that they've lived in for the past several years, just surviving COVID in college, I think should lead at the top of every resume, because no one's been able to do that except this generation.
That's
And
a
that kind of really matters.
that's a good point. Under experiences surviving COVID,
Yeah.
like that. Hey, we founded our firm, Fifth Element, on the basis that leaders and their businesses can do way better when they're doing good at the same time. That's the premise. You're clearly an early leader in understanding this with your experiences and knowledge. You worked on political campaigns, career services, a lot about people there. How did that evolve for you? And share with us maybe an endeavor or two where it proved to be economically viable while also making a difference.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a mentor of mine several years ago, when we were thinking about the company, reminded me that we can do good for the world and for ourselves at the same time. And so on both ends of that, it feels nice to be building something for me personally and for my family and for others. But if we think through just the purpose of how to get there and what to focus on every step of the way, my journey was a little different in that it's a lot of retrospective understanding. It wasn't intentional, but I just took one step at a time. And so I have a very disjointed career. You had mentioned like all the different areas that I've lived in, but I went from fundraising to careers to an early midlife crisis where I literally joined the circus for a year and a half, certified flying trapeze instructor. Like not many people remember anything other than that about me when we finish these conversations. But I've always been a nurturer, and my love language is words of affirmation. Like I also love people loving me, right? It was talking about my childhood a minute ago. It was a very different place. And so in looking at how to change the world a little bit in a way that I knew that I could control and that I could have impact, I just looked backwards and said, what was that key through line through my entire career? And that was just human beings interacting with each other, regardless of the business or the professional environments we live in.
Yeah, good combination too, because you had universities, politicians, career services, all matching and placing and God knows what there. And so it's pretty interesting. How do you think that led to or gave you a foundation, if you will, for founding Hello Hive?
Yeah, I mean, I look at, again, in retrospect, I had a very successful and fulfilling career working with Tulane University on the advancement side, on the fundraising side. I would not have been able to start this company if I didn't know how to raise money. And so I think a lot of entrepreneurs have lots of great ideas. Several of them are probably 1,000 times better than mine, but I know how to raise money. And so that was the first piece. So I learned from that a critical component. So the fundraising side was important. Then I look at the political fundraising, and that was a difference of me understanding the level at which it was acceptable to be appropriately aggressive, and to communicate directly and transparently with people. Educational fundraising and political are very different, but if they met in the middle, it'd be a nice place. And so from my time on political campaigns, I kind of picked that up. I also understood the power of a person. I worked with candidates. I worked with, individuals whose voice was being received collectively at scale. And so I saw the power in that. And then ironically, the circus is where I picked up my really interest in understanding diversity from a very different level. Under one tent, we had everything that was so different, but it was the first time in my life that I actually felt normal and at home because of everyone around me being so different. And the diversity, there was age, was socioeconomic status, was gender, sexual identity, race, ethnicity, but all of it in one place. And I think now when I look at Hive and what we're doing a lot of the similar piece of putting everything in one community so that diversity has diversity, and that we can still step outside of our individual identities and kind of experience and understand what other perspectives are as well.
Yeah, that's I always like to go through a thread and see where we all have learned something through the thread. You may be the first person that I've talked to that was at the circus. And I don't say that, well, it's kind of funny, but I don't say that totally funny, because what you learn from it, we're gonna be at different places in our lives. It's a choice. Do we want to learn from that, or just have it go by and be nothing? And so, what a great analogy! I don't know. What a great experience to share about that. And being a certified trapeze instructor. Is that what it is?
I talk about this often. It's so funny. I was speaking at a conference in DC a couple of weeks ago, and as part of my talk, I talk about the circus piece, and I say, I'm probably the only person ever that you will hear say that he had an early midlife crisis and joined the circus. In the back of the room, this woman goes, "Nope, me too." And I was like, "What?" And she ended up being the CEO of the company that invited us to it, and she was part of a very famous trapeze family that I know, like I studied, right? And so it was a very cool moment that we had that to share, which we would have never had if I wasn't being a person in front of our company, right? We don't always just need to talk. You asked me earlier not to introduce myself with my title of my company because I'm a person. I do that every day, and what it leads to are actually better professional relationships because people get to meet me first and my job later.
Where people are craving for that. They're craving for that. And, the authenticity, the vulnerability, not to use keywords, but, and all of that stuff. And, it's interesting because the fourth industrial revolution is about AI and tech and whatnot. Although you had appropriately aggressive, that's AA. This is AI. And they say that the fifth industrial revolution is about humanity, and which is half the reason we're called Fifth Element, by the way. And so we focus on how does impact and talent come together to have sustainable results. And diversity is a big part of that. We trademarked the term Leaders Who Care, aka the series Leaders Who Care. If you care about your talent, then you want to have diversity in that talent because that's better for everybody for all sorts of reasons. And it's a clear advantage for better economic results and social impact. So with that said, can you share about your innovative work and leadership at Hello Hive? First of all, tell us where the name came from.
Pretty simply, a hive is a place where individuals come together collectively to produce a sweet product.
I love that. To produce a sweet product. Nice. And share with us about it. How you talk about the diversity of people in the circus and whatnot, and so much of Hello Hive for younger generation, if you will, next gen, is about how important that is, and using technology, the fourth industrial revolution, to be better for humanity. And humanity is individuals, families, business, community, the whole thing.
No, I think people focus a lot on people making technology better, where we focus on technology making people better.
Right.
And so, and we're never going to be technology replacing people, but what we can do with the right technology underneath us is scale the impact of what others historically have just done one-on-one. Scale equity, scale access. This generation of talent prefers talking to technology rather than adults anyways. But there's a unique piece of bringing those two things together. So remembering that technology can feel personalized, that we can make it an experience, not just an application. And then through that, what we do is with unlimited access to communities of talent and communities of employers, make sure that everyone has access and opportunity to learn about what they want to pursue in time to then be competitive for that pursuit, and then to make the first move. And so the way that our technology works is, our candidates get to make the first move, right? If you grabbed Tinder, LinkedIn, Handshake, Uber Eats, and Instagram, and they all had a baby, that's pretty much what we would be right now, because all of those things are people meeting people. And in the recruiting conversation, it's the same thing. We're not recruiters, we're not candidates, we're just two human beings on two sides of the table that are trying to understand each other as quickly as possible, right? And pursue meaningful engagement. And historically, to pursue that meaningful engagement, we've needed to know someone to figure out who we can bring in to make that time to hire shorter. Well, that referral process became quite inequitable, but we've replaced the intention of it with technology instead of people. So, finding ways to get people together faster, but not having some blockers that aren't pretty fair in the meantime.
So how does that work if I'm like, there's Joe, and there's Melinda, and one's Melinda, well, I'm not going to stereotype. Melinda's looking for, doesn't know what she's looking for, maybe even, but
Just most of us, by the way. Yeah.
What's that?
I said, which is most of us.
Right. I still want to be a pro hockey player. And then there's Joe, that's head of HR somewhere. Tell us how it actually works for people.
Yeah, so I think we call it a candidate first platform. What we want to do at scale is introduce career opportunities much earlier on in a student's life cycle, or at times where we can meet that student where they are. And so looking at, a 4-year college experience as an example, and let's use investment banking as an industry. Investment banking is going to start recruiting end of sophomore year. So what does that mean? If we want to empower a student to show up in college having never needed to know or had a dad in investment banking, we've got to get content to them the minute they hit campus, so they at least know a little bit about what to expect. We also need to highlight that investment banking isn't the only shade of finance, it's just the loudest, right? And if someone would have grabbed me at Tulane and said, this thing that you can do with people and relationships in your head, even though you still don't know how the stock market works as a 45-year-old, there's a life for you in wealth management, and that's finance, right? My political days, that was campaign finance, that was just fundraising. So I think it's educating on the front end first, so that a student can kind of pick their head up and say, well, I might want to pursue this track. So choose your own adventure books were a big piece of my childhood. And you would pick up a book and you would say, you get to page 7 and you'd say, well, do you want to follow this character this way or this way? And that's what we're doing. And that, step by step, guiding them into being available and competitive for an industry by the time they're going to start recruiting into it. On the employer side, it's really introducing to employers what we call a lot of reimagined relevant experience. Everything other than my major and my GPA should matter just as much. And with our resume technology, we're able to highlight things that employers wouldn't have seen otherwise, like student organization involvement, scholarship programs, being a first generation college student, things that are not in that experience section, but are actually pretty relevant experience.
See, I think it's brilliant. And I'll tell you why, considering I'm in that business to along, talent and leadership, we focused a lot on experiences and accomplishments, especially when you get to the management executive level, rather than these are my responsibilities, bam, 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 bam. But to what you just said before, and it even relates to the circus, I interviewed a guy a long time ago, young guy, and he kept telling me, I don't really have a lot of experience, but I'm looking for something, I don't know, and everything. And I saw on the very bottom of his resume, he had that he ran the Santa Claus parade. Now, I was the first Jewish guy to run the Santa Claus parade in Winnipeg, Canada. Okay. So that's probably why I noticed it more. However, I do look for things like that. And I said, I didn't make it into it. I said, well, this is cool. You ran the Santa Claus parade. How was that? And he said, well, I had to do a budget. I had to go to the city. I had to argue with the city that we can do this and get permits. Then the sponsors, and then who builds the float and where they're going to float. And then they're arguing where they go in the parade also. And what happens if it rains? I have to have a thing for that and make sure that the funding is in and I can pay for the vendors that are around and all this stuff. And I said, yeah, you're right. You probably don't have a lot of experience.
Yeah. And he was so fortunate to have you sitting there with him to help him understand that. But that's the piece of technology can do that too. Right. So someone puts in our technology that they worked part-time as an Uber Eats driver, right? We know that it's a part-time job, and we're going to fight them when they try to remove that from their resume, because we call it ghost text, right? When you're writing a bullet point, we give you an example, and under that part-time job, we say, don't write just what you did, write why you did it. And driving 3 times a week for Uber becomes, I drove 3 times a week for Uber because I needed to make money to travel to career conferences, the through line there. And then a recruiter reads that and it's a very different receipt of experience. And so it's just telling stories.
Like you said before, you're really finding out about the person and the human being. And it's that, so technology, as you said before, technology helps the person be better by identifying that stuff that then the person can even elaborate on in a conversation or whatnot. I think it's brilliant because we're missing so much of that person, that humanity stuff of who you are, not just what you did at your job type of thing. It's fantastic. And have you found, is there a track record yet? Have you found that leaders have really noticed the difference in all aspects of it, their ability to attract the best people and keep the best people, and maybe even people talking about, I had a conversation with Richard Branson a couple of times at this event, and in both conversations we were talking about pride, that no one really talks so much about they're proud of where they work anymore. Different era, but they used to say that a lot when I was a kid. I heard it. So I would think if it's more humane based or humanity based, that people would say, man, I really like working at this company. And the other point about how you emphasize diversity so much.
Yeah, and I think it's becoming not as much about I love working at this company, but I love working with these people.
Right.
And I think that's what we're intentioned to do. It's connecting people with people. It's not is it breaking down the company employee barrier, and helping companies understand the resiliency of being first generation college students, helping first generation college students understand the resiliency of what they've gone through, and then just allowing people to connect as human beings on the back end. But you actually need technology to do this at scale.
But that's fine. The technology is supposed to help us do these things, and it's a reason we say leaders who care rather than companies who care, because companies can't. And I talk to people about this all the time. The company this, the company that, the company didn't do anything, and type of thing. In fact, there's a documentary was done a number of years ago called The Corporation. It's on YouTube, and they had rules. It was what corporations had to be at that time, and it was about what the people in the company were doing. It's changed where now the corporate is legally a person, and the people don't have accountability for what they do in the company. It's ludicrous.
Yeah, it's insane.
So you're right on. I think it's fantastic what you're doing. And one last question I want to ask you on this part is, one client a while back, he told me, I think it was 21, he told me, Mark, the year 2020 was the year that flew by slowly. And I thought it was a great line, especially since it seems like 2020 was yesterday still in a way, and years ago also. With that said, and everything passing so fast, we're almost at the end of 2023. Can you share what you're most grateful for, and also what you're most hopeful for?
I think, grateful just for my health and my family. appreciative of the opportunity that I've undertaken. I've learned a lot. That we can survive more than we think we can. I like to say I'm raising a company and a kid at the same time, and that's not the easiest thing to do. But I think out of chaos comes opportunity. Back in my former life, a lot of what catalyzed my professional life, and even me living in New York, was Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, and getting displaced in New York and having a whole life up here start then. I think that I saw that happen for me again in 2020. So ironically, horrifically devastating events have served very positive purposes in my life, because I sit in the passenger seat a lot, and I have the universe force me into disruption and change. And so looking back, that's a lot of what I see. There is a YouTube that I watched several times during the pandemic that was about a father telling his son a story called The Great Realization, about everything good that was going to become of everything bad that just happened. And it's made up, but it got me through. But it talks about like all the good stuff on the back end of this, the appreciation of human interaction. I'm a huge hugger, and now people appreciate that more because we get to hug each other again, stuff like that. But it did go by slowly, but we all learned a lifetime in the middle of it.
Hugging is good, physiologically and mentally and everything. It is good, and we missed that the most during that period. But I think it's a brilliant way of looking at things, because the alternative is nowhere near as good if you're just concentrating on the negative stuff all the time that happens. So, hey, I love what you're doing at Hello Hive, and I love you as a person too, and a leader who cares. So thank you for sharing all that. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate the space. I'm looking forward to more conversations. But it's been nice to get to know you, friend.
Thanks, man.